Hello, I'm Diana Coria.
Y yo soy Loreto Rojas. Bienvenidos a MendoLatino. Welcome to another bilingual edition of MendoLatino. This first half hour is going to be in English, and then the second part of the hour is going to be en español. Así que no se vayan, vamos a hacer una parte en español en un momentito más. Adelante, Diana.
That's right, because this way we get to capture all the audience of Mendocino. This is going to be a great show. We're talking about the Mendocino Film Festival. But first, let me back up. MendoLatino is a Spanish language and sometimes bilingual public affairs radio program. We delve into social, cultural, and political issues that are relevant right here in Mendocino and beyond. We broadcast on our local community radio station, KZYX, every second and fourth Monday at 9 a.m. And this is our sixth year on the air. So you can catch this program and any of our past programs on our YouTube channel or Facebook page. And both are just called simply Mendo Latino.
Our radio programs this month, as Diana mentioned before, focus on the Mendocino Film Festival, which begins on Thursday, May 28th through Sunday, May 31st. And today we have the pleasure to interview Theo Rigby. I'm sorry, Theo, probably I'm saying bad your last name. The co-director of a documentary called If I Could Stay, Si Pudiera Quedarme. This compelling film tells the story of two undocumented mothers, Jeanette and Ingrid, who courageously enter local churches to evade deportation and protect their families. It's going to be in the screen. It's going to be screened on Saturday, May 30th at 10 a.m. at the Matheson Center for the Arts in the town of Mendocino.
And in the second half hour, we're going to be interviewing one of the protagonists of this documentary, Jeanette Vizquerra, in Espanol. Jeanette rose to national prominence during the first Trump administration when she and her family uh, went into sanctuary in the First Unitarian Church in Denver, Colorado. In 2017, she was named as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people. So, para ustedes que hablan español, quédense para la segunda hora, la segunda media hora.
So right now I want to introduce the co-director of If I Could Stay, Si Pudiera Quedarme. Theo Rigby is a director, cinematographer, and interactive storyteller based out of San Francisco. If I Could Stay is one of his latest projects. He has been creating films and storytelling events focusing on the immigrant experience in the US for over the last decade, and is the founder of iNation Media. He has directed many other films, including Waking Dreams, Immigrant Nation, The Mayor, and Marathon, among others. He graduated with an MFA in documentary film from Stanford University, and before making films was an award-winning photojournalist working for major newspapers and magazines around the world. Welcome, Theo.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I believe you probably pronounce your last name Rigby, yes?
Rigby, yeah, Rigby.
Okay, great.
All good with me.
So before we get to the questions, I just want to say to our audience that the film that we're talking about today, I want to give you a quick little context. If I Could Stay is dealing with the faith-based sanctuary movement. And that is basically when faith-based communities open up their doors to protect immigrants facing deportation. So sanctuary in churches, has never really been a formal legal right. It's relied on a federal policy that treated churches as sensitive locations, just as they did with schools and some other sites. And that's where immigration enforcement was generally avoided. So during the first administration of Donald Trump, that policy basically remained. And many churches at that time became spaces of refuge, offering protection grounded more in tradition than in the law. Today, that landscape is really less certain, making sanctuary a much more precarious status. And Theo will probably tell us more about that. We definitely have a question about it. So this is the context behind the film that we're about to discuss. So let's kick it off, Theo. And I just first want to notice that you've dedicated your filmmaking career to focusing on immigrants, immigrant lives, etc. Does this connect directly to the work that you did as a photojournalist, or how did your interest evolve?
Actually, it does. At first, I was interested in immigration issues. This is about 20 years ago, and at the time there weren't really there wasn't that much. There wasn't that much content and media, films, articles, photo stories re that really got to the layered, nuanced experience of undocumented and mixed status communities. It was pretty surface. There are a couple films, and everybody's seen El Norte, but I was kind of craving more, and very, very naively thought I needed to go to the border, the U.S.-Mexico border, to find an immigration story, even though immigrant communities were all around me. Um, and there, I was still mainly a photojournalist. I connected with a mixed status family, a mom who had 14 kids, some of which were born here, some of which were not, and were undocumented. And I saw a family where the 13-year-old was undocumented and the 12-year-old wasn't, and they were a year apart, and their ability to, access many different things, uh, many different aspects of life in the United States were really different. And about a year after I started photographing them, the mom and the second oldest daughter got picked up by the Border Patrol. And then I started to see the kind of immigrant detention system and how that worked. And my role kind of got a bit more layered because I started, just supporting them as an ally, trying to, even though I wouldn't have used that word at the time. But yeah, my role and kind of like involvement as a filmmaker, friend, ally, supporter, kind of got all jumbled up, and I became kind of part of their family, and I'm still in touch with them today. So that was the beginning, and then it wasn't like an issue for me anymore, or like a theme or whatever. It's just people and my friends and my this beautiful family that kind of let me into their lives. And now at this point, 20 years later, I have like many, many families that I'm integrally connected to. And folks ask a lot like, "Oh, why you? Like, are you an immigrant?" Like, no, I'm not an immigrant. Like, why do you do this work? And how can we do more of this work and get do important work supporting immigrant communities? And I often say, proximity is key. Just like get closest to, not just with immigration, any kind of work that you want to do in the world, like get closest to the people who are living those issues themselves, who are closest to those issues. Just get close to people, um, ask questions, approach with inquiry, and hopefully the rest will flow. So that's how it all got started.
Right, and you have done something similar with the protagonist of the this film, If I Could Stay, Si Pudiera Quedarme, because you have followed them for several years. So this is being sort of a method that you have cultivated, right? Like creating a connection with people and then following them and seeing how they are treated and what is the outcome. So could you tell us a little bit about this? When you set out, did you know that this film will take so long to make? And I'll tell the audience also how many years are you covering when you are depicting the life of these two women.
Sure. And to frame it, Diana, you mentioned kind of sanctuary and faith-based sanctuary during the first Trump administration and the sensitive locations policies that Department of Homeland Security had since Obama, that said ICE wouldn't enforce deportation in places of worship, schools, hospitals, courtrooms. And on day one of this Trump administration, that was rescinded. But the reason that I got into this work around the sanctuary movement, is just that this idea of sanctuary, this question of what does sanctuary mean to you? Every person is going to answer that question differently. It's deeply personal, maybe political, maybe not. maybe spiritual and faith-based, maybe not. Um, and that deep, deep complexity is what kind of drew me and has kept me in exploring this work around sanctuary. And I have to say that in the film, you see these faith communities being host congregations to host, Jeanette and Ingrid to come physically into the churches, um, and and kind of like claim sanctuary in that physical sense. But the idea of sanctuary and the sanctuary movement is multifaceted and multi-layered. And it changes over time, depending on what the issue is and what the situation is. So right now, I'm actually starting a film on the sanctuary movement of the 1980s when refugees from Guatemala and Salvador were coming up from the horrible civil wars that was being funded by the US. And this national kind of faith-based sanctuary movement was born. Many people in the process of making that film are like, whoa, you can't like, it didn't start then. It didn't start in the 80s. What about sanctuary for conscientious objectors in the Vietnam War? That was a huge thing. And churches and faith-based communities had a big part to play that. And really the idea of sanctuary, it goes back to the Bible and probably before that. Um, so that's kind of what got me in, that this is a really big, kind of juicy, meaty question that is kind of evergreen and can be approached in a lot of different ways. And just as a filmmaker and storyteller, those are really great places to kind of dive into because I want to make work that has a lot of different entry points that is not just for one kind of like niche target audience, but um, can be meaningful to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. Um,
And just saying that, oh, sorry, did you want to finish?
sure, no, go ahead.
Oh, just saying that, I do want to mention that this film is bilingual. It also has subtitles, so it is accessible in Spanish and English. And I wanted to just call out very quickly a few things without giving away any spoilers for people who want to come see the film. But I want to call out that um, I love the sensitivity towards the two women. The way, how can I put this? The film doesn't try to narrate their lives. Your film very much tries to let them narrate their lives and call their own terms. But there's one scene I want that I was very impressed by, among several. And this one was when Reverend Kelly Dignan speaks to the church about Ingrid's pregnancy. And then she starts to call out people and says, well, some of you are being judgmental about why is she pregnant? And I just want you to say that's none of your business and it's for her to decide her life. And you guys have got to unlearn your own patterns of dominance. And I was like, whoa, I love this. That as a pastor or whatever, reverend, she's calling that out in her own congregation. And it also brings up a moment of tension because sanctuary isn't just la la la, and you do bring out throughout the film moments, flashpoints. So do you want to say a little bit about that? And it did seem that things shifted after that in that congregation, but I wanted you to comment a little bit about that process and that leadership of those pastors.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, what we see in the film is Ingrid and Jeanette, who both have deportation orders, and they are at imminent danger of being deported. And they both have been in the US for decades. They both have multiple children, and they want to stay here and not have their families separated by deportation. So they make this incredibly difficult decision to go into sanctuary, as in physically going into the churches, with the concept of physically staying there once they go in until they can get some sort of legal reprieve, get some sort of legal status or a temporary status, so they can leave the church without being at risk of deportation. So they go in not knowing when they're going to come out. And the film is essentially following their journey. And the film takes place over predominantly 5 years, but really over 8 or 9 years, since we just updated the film and finished it a couple weeks ago. And um, this idea of moving yourself and in Ingrid's case, your family and your young kids into a church for an indefinite amount of time, essentially kind of like self-incarcerating yourself, is really hard. And churches are not meant to be lived in. They're not homes. Um, so uh there is this distinct kind of tension in this incredibly hard moment for most impacted family of Jeanette and Ingrid, and moving into a place that is not meant to be lived in. And these faith communities being host congregations and hosting people who are very, very different from them. These women are, immigrants, Spanish speaking. They both speak a bit of English, but predominantly Spanish speaking, undocumented immigrant women of color. And the congregations are mostly middle upper class, pretty affluent white folks who don't speak Spanish, don't speak much Spanish. So there's inherent tension there, right? There's very different communities kind of coming together in this really hard scenario. And the Reverend Dignan, yeah, she points out like this sanctuary work is not easy. This is not for the faint of heart. And this is not the way that some people want to do justice work, you know? But in all of the, in all of the adversity comes amazing, incredible, really life-changing kind of relationships for everyone involved. Especially for the congregants who got to know and become part of like Jeanette and Ingrid's lives. Um, what also comes in this situation is that everybody in the congregation brings all of their bias, implicit or otherwise. They bring all of their stereotypes, all of their assumptions. You know, the idea of this film is that it's showing that, congregants and Ingrid and Jeanette, like, we're all just humans. We're all people going through our lives, bringing so much to everything we do. Jeanette and Ingrid really specifically to, trying to provide for their children and keep their children safe. And and in Ingrid's case, we see she becomes pregnant in the film with her third child, and we see people becoming incredibly judgmental about that decision, essentially, to have a kid and to keep the child. Uh, People questioning whether she should actually keep the child and go forward with having a kid, being in the situation that she is in. Um, and it really, for me, the most profound element of that part of Ingrid's life and that part of the congregation's experience was when I asked Ingrid about it. I'm like, how do you deal with that? How do you react? Like, what do you think when people say such incredibly judgmental, hurtful um, things to you about the most intimate thing you could possibly imagine about having a child and about your body and your family? And she said, you know what? I can't let that negativity in. I have to completely block those kind of comments and that kind of energy because if I let that in, that would actually hurt my baby. That will hurt my child that I'm growing inside me because of all the stress and anxiety that would induce. So, to keep my family safe and to keep my body and my baby healthy, I'm not even going to let that in.
Mm.
And that was just, a quiet and kind of, soft, but like incredibly powerful, um, uh, just kind of little glimpse inside the courage and just incredible human being that Ingrid is. And she's normally on the shy side. She was not an activist before all this. She's not speaking on microphones. She was kind of forced into that. Um, and that was a profound moment that I was really felt blessed to have been able to, by way of the camera and filmmaking and documentary, have that conversation with her and hear that from her because honestly, I don't think many other people were asking her that question about how she felt about that. Instead of saying, "Oh, I'm sorry people said that," like, no, how does that make you feel? How do you deal with that? Um, and I felt like the being there as a filmmaker was yeah, an incredibly blessed place to be.
Yes, it seems that you being involved in all this process, it must have been quite challenging, right? And also gratifying. Can you talk about a little bit about that, about what were the biggest challenges that you encounter and during the filming?
Well, as I mentioned, this film was kind of you jump in, and then you just are along for the ride. And I was very clear with Jeanette and Ingrid that with my intentions, we're gonna start filming. My intention is to be here no matter what happens. If you go back to Peru or go back to Mexico, if you stay here, like if it takes a month or a year or 5 years or six, whatever it is, like I'm here to stay. And I think um and then later Florencia joined the project and we were there. We were there to stay. We kept on coming back and coming back and coming back. And that really kind of defined us as being very different from basically everyone else because the news media would come in, do an interview and leave, or maybe they would come and do another story when something else happened. Um, but we were there consistently and for just the smaller moments, for the baby shower or just for kind of like a quiet day or in Jeanette's case, when everybody kind of abandoned her and left her, throughout COVID was a really, really difficult time. Many of the congregants are older people, like taking in health concerns. It's a really hard situation um, to support someone in sanctuary in the middle of a global pandemic. So yeah, I think the most difficult part was one, just trying to know when to be there. Or trying to foresee kind of what would be a good time to be there because we had very little budget and I'm in the Bay Area. My co-director Florencia is in Los Angeles. So we'd have to fly there and we would have to pick and choose those times where we would kind of hope, well, maybe know that something interesting would be happening and then hope that other stuff would happen at the same time. Um, and then everything production was always very compressed because we're only there for 72 hours, 48 hours. So we're trying to do as much as possible. And when you kind of like dive into someone's life and then dive out and dive in and dive out, um, it's hard, but I think it became easier over time just because our relationships grew over time. So we're kind of, part of the family and we could just drop in and be there with kind of a pretty smooth transition.
That's so interesting because it seemed to me that you were there all the time. Like I come from a documentary filmmaking background as well. And it just felt like, there are films where filmmakers are there when you get up in the morning, when you go to sleep at night. And it had that feel to me,
Mhm.
and so, one question I wanted to ask with my documentary background is I was like, I remember one time I was filming something very, very sensitive, and a few of the people turned around to me and said, "Turn that camera off now." And I
Mhm.
did because I was going to respect them. But did you make those boundaries yourself? I did. It didn't, it seemed to me that both the women who are so amazing and so powerful, really, they let you in to very sensitive moments. But was there any moments where you doubted or other people doubted the process of filming or when you should keep the camera on or turn it off?
There wasn't much doubt there. There were definitely moments when, yeah, when it was very clear. I think just with experience, you kind of understand that flow of just people and what's appropriate and what's not. And as a filmmaker, you're always asking yourself, what do I need to capture? Like, what do I need to get? Like, and in a feature-length documentary sense, you're thinking of scenes, right? So can we get this scene? Can we get that? Is this an important scene? So to me, there's always a calculus of if it's really sensitive, or if there's like some kind of like re-traumatization happening that which is part of the filmmaking process with people who have been through so much trauma. Um, Basically just asking myself like, is it worth it? Is it worth it to be here with the camera right now? Because these women and families are going through such an incredibly difficult time that need to be really conscientious and have given us so much trust in their stories and in their family and in their physical space. I needed to be asking myself, like, yeah, is it worth it to be here? Do we really need to be recording? Is it time to stop recording and put the camera down and like just be there and hang out? Is it necessary for us just to take off? And there were multiple times when we were there, we flew there and had the whole crew there and everything, and they just weren't wanting to film or just like weren't wanting to be on camera, especially during COVID in such a incredibly difficult time, like mentally and emotionally. So,
No,
um,
valió la pena. It was worth it. It's totally an excellent movie and documentary. Theo, we are very thrilled to talk to you today about this feature that's going to be at the film festival. And we have only a couple more minutes, so I want to just let you say whatever you would like to share with our audience before we close.
sure, maybe just hopes and dreams of the distribution of the film and kind of impact of the film in communities. We really are looking for the film to be used as a tool to kind of see and experience what happened within these two stories of sanctuary. See what kind of we see a lot of examples of really great allyship and some examples of not such great allyship that we talked about earlier. But the hope is that it's really a tool to talk about how are allied communities doing social justice? How can they do social justice in a healthy and positive way that centers the voices of most impacted people? Deanna, you mentioned that like this film is really kind of like from the voice of Ingrid and Jeanette, and all of my films are that way very intentionally. So thank you for for noticing and doing social justice that not only centers most impacted voices, but and something that Jeanette talks about a lot, but really lets those most impacted people lead the movement, and folks who are closest to those issues know best and know the most and are the ones that have the answers. And in this film, we see allied communities kind of coming in sometimes saying like, "Oh, we know how to help. Like we know what to do. We know the answers." Um, so in trying to use this film to shift that
Yes,
dynamic.
yes, absolutely. And we are going to continue the conversation because we are going to be there with you after the showing of the documentary. You were just listening MendoLatino, and we are talking to Theo Rigby. He's the co-director If I Could Stay, Si Pudiera Quedarme. It's going to be shown at the Mendocino Film Festival Saturday, May 30th at 10 a.m. at Matheson. And we will be there with Diana to share and continue this conversation that we know our community will be thrilled to have with you and the rest of the crew. Thank you so much for coming to MendoLatino today, Theo.
Thank you so much.